Boone, you can be seated. You've been previously sworn. You may inquire, sir.
For the record, just state your name again.
Sarah Boone.
All right. Now, this is unlike a trial, so you're allowed to speak in a narrative form, as well as I understand you have taken some notes or written a letter that you want to read from, and then you want to speak to the court after that.
Yes.
All right. Why don't you go ahead and get started?
This is actually an edited version of.
Hold on a second. Hold it.
I had a lot to say. I've had a lot of time to think about things, and I didn't really know how to put it on paper, and I didn't know how much I could say or how little I should say. So what I have here is, like I said, an edited version. But I would like to read the more important parts that I feel that everyone should know that wasn't said in my actual trial. And on top of what I have on paper, this is just the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg. So I wanted to read this, and then if I may, I would like to address everyone in my apology on top of my statement.
You may proceed, ma'am.
Kintu Sukuroi is a kind of Japanese ceramic style which means to repair with gold. In this tradition, when a ceramic piece breaks, an artisan will fuse the pieces back together again using liquid gold or gold dust lacquer. So rather than being covered up, the breaks become more obvious and a brilliant new piece of art emerges from the brokenness. It embraces flaws, weakness, and imperfections, and also teaches the essence of resilience. Every crack in a ceramic piece is a part of its history, and each piece becomes more beautiful because it has been broken. This is the wisdom of Kintu Sukuroi. In my wisdom and with all of my repairs, then, now, and ongoing, God is, has been, and will always be my artisan. All of my gold is forgiveness. This has held me together, made me shine brighter, and overcome the damage caused by George Torres, the Torres family, the justice system, Orange County Corrections Department, social media, scoundrel detectives, infamy, defamation, ongoing constitutional rights violations, second-degree murder, forced into being pro se. Just as gold is very precious, forgiveness is invaluable. Forgiveness is not an attempt to change or forget who, what, or how you've lived through to be so gold, but an act of grace, humility, and considerable self-compassion to be set free from sorrow. Withholding forgiveness denies your brilliance and adds even greater grief and deeper heartache, irreparable cracks on top of the already that no one deserves, no matter the pain or disappointment, untruths or injustice. It doesn't matter. As the more broken you are, even though now different than before, you've become more outstanding and more extraordinary. Above all, when you let go of blame, misunderstandings, excuses, give up your anger and cease from resentment, this is forgiven. And when you forgive, you heal. And when you heal, you move forward. My goal begins with George Torres, and every time he slapped me, kicked, punched, spit on, raped, stabbed, choked, laughed at, pushed, pulled, dragged, whipped, tripped, stole from, lied, terrorized, threatened, humiliated, forced, degraded, made me cry. Every time he tried to end me, defeat, or destroy. I forgive George for beating me senseless, for trying to sleep because I had to go to work or my son's field trip the next day, for ruining my deceased family's heirlooms, traditions, and keepsakes, my son's furniture, destroying the television we watched together, for wrecking our townhome by breaking windows, punching holes in the walls and doors, ramming his entire body into glass doors, kicking in my front and back door over and over and over, for breaking or removing the locks from all of the doors and sometimes the knobs altogether, so I had nowhere to feel safe, including the sacred space of my son's room where he beat me bloody on his bed, for terrorizing and threatening my blind and deaf dogs by leaving the gate open I built to keep them safe, telling me he hoped I'd find their bloated dead body in the pond or scrape their remains off of the pavement, for kicking them off of the bed and throwing across the room because they were trying to protect me, for threatening to make me unrecognizable to my son by breaking all of the bones in my face, like his brother Moses did to him after he kept seeing all of the bruises from George beating me, like all of the times their father beat their mother, for all of the drunken rages and fist fights with so many neighbors when wandering into their apartments during hunting expeditions after I had escaped, for drowning me in liquor and wine because I didn't want to drink, causing me to urinate on myself, then butting the end of the bottle in my face, giving me 2 black eyes and a bloody nose, for making me experience what it is to be sodomized, threatening to kill my friends and the neighbors when they checked on me to make sure I was alive and in one piece, for threatening to burn down our townhome and set my car on fire because I got a job, for holding me hostage on weekends my son was supposed to come over by keeping my keys around his neck, my phone in his crotch, and a butcher knife stuck in the middle of the table as a warning not to ask anything or try to leave, for stabbing me in the leg and not letting me call 911 for an ambulance or seek help, where I nearly bled to death until I concocted a lie to save him from being arrested, for destroying my phone with a hammer because my son called, for me experiencing ever being arrested and after today, prison, for beating me almost blind, crushing my occipital lobe, for having me experience what it means to see stars like in the cartoons where a character has a tall lump on their head. I had that too, and many times, for dragging me downstairs by my hair in the middle of the night just to sit next to him, for taking my car driving drunk with my debit card to buy more alcohol while I slept, even after I kindly explained the importance of my car to take my son to school foremost, me to work, and he to his batterers intervention classes and probation officer meetings, where I would be forced to sit for hours in the parking lot waiting for him, for causing me so much trauma and pain mentally, physically, emotionally, I had to be hospitalized more than once, for destroying my reputation and integrity, for my M for murderer scarlet letter, not letting me feel safe to live, talk to other people, spend time with my son, have a job, friendships, simply go to the bathroom with the door closed, or go to sleep soundly or comfortably. I forgive George for lying, for him trying in so many ways, so many times, to end me with his terrifying love. I also forgive the Torres family, his mother and father foremost, also his 2 ex-wives and daughters, all for knowing who George was capable of and has done in the past, his history of violence and where he learned it, then to keep turning a blind eye when I would ask for help. All of his siblings, including Farrell Torres, who is now on his way to prison for stabbing the mother of their baby in the side of her head. For everyone who knew what George was doing to me, sometimes how and when, but allowed and enabled. I forgive them for caring too late. I hope they all ask themselves while quiet and comfortable in bed at night the uneasy question, what could I have done to stop this from happening to both of them? And after all the times Sarah tried to, by asking for help from all of us and so many times. Another great contributor of my gold is social media, with its greed, insensitivity, deception, obvious exploitation, and advantageous gain from my criminal case as a whole, and for sentencing me by anticipation as a result of ignorance and hate, conjured and fabricated by the organized crime that is social media, which condemned me in the court of global public opinion since the beginning. My family law case is the new prey waiting to be picked apart and pillaged from me being made infamous by social media in my criminal case. It simply seems I cannot forgive and be forgiven and move forward. Social media has made me a pariah. It has caused great oppression and undeniable disadvantages, especially by broadcasting and manipulating my cases online. In my criminal case, as a result, my opportunities to be given a fair, proper, and uninfluenced, successful conclusion was heavily depleted and poisoned. I forgive them. Also, all of the media tycoons for not having a life of their own, trying so desperately to make themselves seem so right by making me appear so wrong. Forgiveness for prejudgment, ridiculous theatrics, lies, making and taking blood money from my and others' misfortunes, accidents, and catastrophes. It's all over their hands and their keyboards. And even after all that's been said and done, theorized, hypothesized, scrutinized, and blasphemed, in my case, still no one knows me. In the end, I forgive myself for not choosing my life sooner, for not being more brave, vigilant, bolder, and outspoken, stronger, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, for being hopeless, desperate, simple-minded, weak, and inexperienced. I forgive myself for not realizing I was enduring a life of domestic violence and that the vicious cycle of never ends. I had nothing to compare to. I've never been hit by a man ever before in my life. I was raised hitting a woman was wrong and should never happen. No excuse. I forgive myself for not escaping permanently, for not fighting back sooner to save myself, my son, my dogs, home, and car. Having 20/20 hindsight thinking of everything I could have done differently or better to avoid the outcome. I think about this every day since. Also, of all the good days we had together, for him at least, while I was constantly in hyperdrive, high alert, and paranoid, making sure I did everything right all the time. If not, the great possibility I would be ended as George threatened me with so many times before. I forgive myself for falling in love with a monster, and no matter how grotesque he may become, I still loved him, hoped, and forgave. I tried breaking the spell so he wouldn't be a monster anymore. I saw who he was inside. George made me then, now, and always love him for all of his cracks also. We made each other our own brilliant pieces of art from the cracks and repairs. Unfortunately, not all cracks can be. In all of my forgiveness, George is my greatest lesson and will forever be a part of me. I think of him every day and still speak to him when alone on the rec yard. I ask his forgiveness and that he looks for me at the gates of heaven so I can tell him how sorry I am, endlessly, and that I never stopped loving him. In all of it and still. When I first came to jail, I put my mat under my bed and cried all day and all night for months, only falling asleep from being so exhausted with grief. I wrote him letters. I wrote his family and his daughters, apologizing for asking for their forgiveness. But due to fear that my life or sons would be jeopardized, I did not send. I am sorry. I cannot begin to fathom any of their grief and sadness. Please forgive me. Almost everything reminds me of him, seeing my stab wound especially every day especially. It truly reminds me that all I really did live through. George haunts me. He is everywhere. I believe because I do still love him, think of him, and miss his laugh the most. In my heart, I know he is with me and understands that this tragedy was not intentional. I hope everyone can, his family foremost. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please wholeheartedly know that, and always, I would never. Forgive me, George. Forgive me, Torres family. Forgive me, Judge Cranick. To the entire planet, please forgive me. I graciously and humbly ask for consideration, for forgiveness to be extended instead of judgment, for reconciliation and restoration for all of us to move forward. My apology is profuse and ceaseless. Allow me, please, to brush off the muck, wipe the blood off of my face, and fix the cuts in my skin. I ask for understanding in what really happened and for how long, for second chances, repentance, and redemption to advocate for all domestic violence survivors, to help them overcome, heal, and still hope, always, to make their voices heard, to confidently walk with all of their scars on the outside and the inside, to help them not ever become a casualty of domestic violence as so many others, to stop the abuse and maltreatment before it's too late. There is always hope, and you can survive. In my soft-spoken conclusion, I ask this: would I be the darling mother, celebrated woman of the year, if it were I who died? How many daughters, mothers, sisters, aunts, grandmothers, nieces, and friends have been because they did? I am a survivor. Learn to do good, seek justice, rebuke oppressors, defend the fatherless, plead for the widow. Isaiah 117, all-encompassing, protect the abused.
Ms. Boone, is that the end of your written statement?
Yes,
Now, gathering your thoughts, did you want to make an oral statement?
I do.
All right, would you do that now?
Yes, please. My statement, my verbal statement is primarily to the Torres family, to the judge, to his daughters. I know you all know who I really am and that I did care for George and that I do still love George. I know you know that we had very many good days. And I take offense to the statement of being said that this is just for a moment. Right now with me here in the courtroom in front of you all, this is just for a moment. But the moments before that, in order for me to be here, is endless. It's everlasting. The scars that I have on the inside, my outside scars have healed except for my stab wound. But this has changed me as a person to see things differently and to understand things differently and to not be weak and just try to protect yourself and forever, regardless of the time that I may receive from today, I forever will have this experience. I forever will have George Torres with me in my heart, in my mind, my body, and my soul. As he and I used to say that we were one soul split into two bodies. This is not just for a moment. It may be for everyone in this courtroom, but when I leave, this is forever. When you all leave, that this is forever. This is forever for everyone here and those who it matters to most. I am one of those who will experience this forever. I'm sorry. Words do not define my shame, and I don't know what else it is that I can say and convey to the Torres family how this happened. The ifs and whys and how really don't matter. It happened, and I'm sorry. Words cannot describe. And I hope that everyone can forgive me, the Torres family most of all, and his daughters, because I know what he meant to them. And I don't think that anybody ever understood what he meant to me and I to him. And I ask for forgiveness.
Now, Ms. Boone, I have just one or two questions, if you don't mind. And you can speak on it if you want or not. But this is a unique case, and one of the reasons it's so unique is that you were in jail for 4.5 years prior to your trial. And I understand that when you were brought up as a child, that you did have some spirituality in your family, some church, some religion.
Always.
But I understand that you got away from that. Did you have a chance during the 4.5 years to look back at your spirituality?
Absolutely. You know, everyone supposes that this is one of the worst experiences of my life, and it's actually been one of my greatest. If I were not beaten to death, I was going to work myself to death on the outside, and I never had time to get back into my Bible and to pray and to be with the Lord. And I, being here incarcerated, have had time, of course, to get closer to God, to reacquaint myself to Him and realize what it's all about. This is all temporary, and when I say temporary, I don't mean by being set free in jail or from prison or wherever else. It means being set free and temporary, meaning that you work for something higher, you work for God, that you strive for your crown to be placed upon your head by Jesus Christ by being said, You have done well, my good and faithful servant. I've always tried to be a good and faithful servant. I was just a servant as opposed to doing all that I can when my family were alive and I was going through everything up to this point. I've become so much more closer to the Lord, and it's made me such a better person, and I hope that I am an example going forward of the Lord's light and can draw many people to me because of it.
Thank you.
Any follow-up, State?
No, I assumed that was the final word.
Thank you. She can return back to council's table. Anything else from your